In this lesson, we're going to look at buying, renting, or leasing. Now, this is a big decision for a lot of people, whether it's a vehicle or property, and how do we make that decision? So we'll take a look at that in this lesson. Now, what is a lease? A lease is a contract for purchasing the use of property, such as a building or vehicle, from another, the lessor, for a specified period. Equity is the difference between the value of an item and the amount still owing. So as you pay for something, since if you don't pay it in full, the equity is the amount that you owe, or the difference between the amount that you owe and how much you've already paid off. An asset, that's an item of portion of an item owned. It's also known as property. Assets include items such as real estate, investment portfolios, vehicles, arts, gems, and so on. So we're going to use these words. Make sure that when we're going through examples, when these words come back, you come back and reference this so that you understand what we're talking about. Once we take a look at some examples, it'll become a little bit more clear when we need to know that information. So let's take a look at example 1. Amanda is a civil engineer. She needs a vehicle for work on average 12 days each month. She's currently renting a vehicle, is considering buying or leasing. So here are her options. It says she can lease a vehicle, which requires a down payment of $4,000 and lease payments of $380 per month plus tax. She would need insurance at $1,220 each year, which could be paid monthly, and would have to pay for repairs and some maintenance, which would average $50 each month. For the 4-year lease she's looking at, she would have no equity in the vehicle at the end of the term, since the car would belong to the leasing company. The other option, it says she could buy a vehicle for $32,800 and finance for a 4-year term at 4.5% interest. Financing means that she's not paying for it in full, she'll pay for it in portions. 4.5% interest compounded monthly. She would have the same insurance, repair, and maintenance costs as she would have had with the leasing. However, the equity of the vehicle would be considered an asset. She would continue to rent at $49.99 per day plus tax with unlimited kilometers. So looking at these 3 options, which option would you recommend for Amanda and why? So let's do the math for each of these options. Okay, so there's some space on the next page here where we can outline everything. So let's start with the leasing. Okay, so for the leasing, the term is 4 years. She has to make a down payment of $4,000. Now it says that the lease payments are $380 per month plus tax. So 380 times 1.13, 1.13 being our 13% tax, and that would give us $429.40. Now, this is monthly. So our total lease cost then would be that $429.40 times the 12 months times the 4 years. And that would give us $20,611.20. That number makes sense. Now, in addition to that, she's got the insurance, which is $1,220, and that's an annual cost, so that would be times 4, $4,880. And then we've got the repairs and maintenance. And that's $50. and then that's a monthly payment as well. So that would be 12 months a year for 4 years. And that would give us $2,400. Okay, so if we take all of these values and add them up, so what values am I talking about? Well, the $4,000, which is the down payment, plus the leasing cost, so we've done that for the 4 years monthly, plus the insurance, plus the repairs. Add all those values up, we'll get how much it's going to cost her to lease for the 4 years. So that's $31,891.20. Now this is fine, except when we're looking at buying and renting, those costs are going to be monthly costs, and really when you're leasing, you're paying monthly as well. So let's see, now that we have the overall cost, what would it cost her per month? So all we would have to do is take that value and divide by 12. So the monthly cost would be, we divide that by 12. Now, not just dividing by 12, because if we divide only by 12, that's just the 12 months, but also divide by 4 years, right? So 12 times 4, because that's going to be how many months there are in the 4 years. Doing that, you get $664.40 per month. Okay, so that's what it's costing per month to lease. Now, let's see what that's going to be if she were to outright and buy the vehicle. So if we go back and look, there's no mention of a down payment, so the loan that she's going to require is the $32,800. So we'll put that in for PV, right? And she's got an interest rate of 4.5%. And again, this is going to be for 4 years with monthly payments, compounded monthly, and we want a future value of 0. So put that into your TVM solver, and you should get $747.95 per month. How much interest? So if we put that into our interest calculation here, that would be from 1 to 4 times 12, or 48. You would get, punching that into your calculator, $3,101.81. Now, this is all good and fine, but we still want to know what the overall cost is. So let's take the cost for our car, which would be that $32,800, plus all that extra interest, $3,101.81. And it also says that the insurance and the repairs is going to be the same. So using our calculations from above, we would have the $4,880 in insurance, and then the repair and maintenance cost we figured out to be $2,400. Adding all that up, we get an overall cost of $43,181.81. Now, if we wanted to do that per month, like we did above, so that would be not per, but for 4 years. So figuring this out monthly would be that same value divided by 4 years times 12 months, or 48. And that gives us a monthly cost of $899.62. So if all we're looking at is cost, right, how much this is going to be costing you out of your pocket, leasing $664.40 per month, buying $899.62 per month. So far, financially, leasing is the better deal. But remember that when you're leasing, right, if that's going back to the company, the leasing company, then that means you have no equity when you're done that. So that's something you want to look at when you're making those decisions. Now, there's one other option, which is renting. So currently she's renting this vehicle for $49.99 per day. So if we look back at the question, it says that she needs this for 12 days. Okay, 12 days per month. So if I times that, I'll just show you where that was here in the question. On average, 12 days each month. So a lot of people think that that 12 is coming from 12 months in a year, but that's the 12 days per month. You can make a note of that for yourself. So if we do that calculation, she's paying $599.88 per month. Okay, now it says plus tax. So if we do that, that would be $599.88 times 1.13, which gives us $677.86 per month. So looking at our three values, that looks close, 677, but it looks like if we're just looking financially, that leasing is the better option. But again, like I said before, there's other factors, other variables that come into play when making those decisions. So when you come up with a conclusion, you can show the math and show financially what to do. But if your answer talks about something else, that's okay, as long as you have a backup mathematically for what the answer should be. So we'll just write that leasing is the best option financially. And the decision will be different based on where you are in your life at that moment in time too, right? If you know you're not staying in a certain place, maybe you're not going to keep that vehicle. Maybe you want to sell the vehicle. If you buy it, you know you're going to sell it later. There's lots and lots of variables that come into play. Words that come up often when we're talking about buying and leasing and renting is appreciation and depreciation. Appreciation is an increase in the value of an asset over time, and depreciation is a decrease in the value of an asset over time. Most often, depreciation are items that depreciate our vehicles, right? So usually the moment you drive a vehicle off the lot, it's already depreciated in value, gone down in value. Things that appreciate in value might be something like jewelry over time, sometimes old cars, not like old broken cars, but if they're collector's items, those kinds of things might appreciate. Houses may appreciate or depreciate depending on where you're living, the area, where in the world you're living, and so on. So make sure you're looking at those words and understanding how to apply them to the situation that you're trying to solve for. In example 2, it says, a luxury vehicle rental company depreciates the value of its vehicles each year over 5 years. At the end of the 5th year, the company writes off the vehicle for its scrap value. The company uses a depreciation rate of 40% per year. A asks what is the scrap value of each car below, and B asks what is the original purchase price of each car. So for part B, we're working backwards a little bit. But what does this mean? So depreciates the value means loses value, right? And the depreciation rate of 40%, what that means is it's keeping 60%. If it loses 40%, then it's keeping 60% of its value. And that will help us when we're calculating the current value of the vehicle. So for A, if we look at car A, the starting value that we have, a 2-year-old vehicle, is $43,200. Now, if it's keeping 60% of its value, if we times that by 0.6, we get $25,920. That's now the 3-year-old vehicle. But we want the scrap value, so we have to get to 4 years and then to 5 years. So we're going to continue with this, take the $25,920 and get 60% of that, and so on. So keep going until you get to the scrap value of the vehicle. And you get a final answer of $9,331.20 for the scrap value. Now this would be quite tedious if we had to do this, let's say, for 10 years. So thinking of a way that we can do this more efficiently, if we took that $43,200, we multiplied by 60% 3 times. Well, if we just go 0.6 to the exponent of 3, we would get that exact same answer of $9,331.20. Okay, so feel free to use that as long as you understand where it's coming from. So if we do that for car B is younger, so it's a 1-year-old car, and the 1-year-old car is starting at $75,600, but it's depreciating at the same 60%. So it's going to be 4 years before it's a 5-year-old scrap value car. And if we do that, multiply by 60% to the exponent of 4, we get a final answer of $9,797.76 in 5 years. Okay, so that's how we can deal with depreciation. Now B asks, what was the original purchase price of each car? And we will have to work backwards to get there. So if we look at car A, it's currently worth $43,200, and now that's at 2 years. If we had to multiply by 60% to get the older value, if we work backwards from there, that would be dividing by 60%. If we did that once, that would give us how much it costs when it was 1-year-old. And if we divide that by 60% again, that would be what it costs when it's new. So go ahead and punch that into your calculator, and you should get that the vehicle used to be worth $120,000. Now because car B is newer, it's only a 1-year-old car, we would only have to divide by 60 once to get the new value, and that's $126,000. Okay, and you can always verify if you wanted to go back and plug that in and see if you get the same scrap value cost if you wanted. But that's how you would solve using a depreciation value. On the next page here, you can see another term called disposable income. The amount of income that someone has available to spend after all regular expenses and taxes have been deducted. So if you're working paycheck to paycheck, then you have no disposable income. That means that there's no cash flow, you have nothing left to spend on anything. So the disposable income is you've paid all your mandatory payments, and now you've got some extra money that you can do something with. So in example 3, they use this term. It says a 10-year-old hot water heater in Tom's home stopped working, so he needs a new one. Tom works for minimum wage. After paying his monthly expenses, he has $35 in disposable income left. He has an unused credit card that charges 18.7% compounded daily. So he has 2 options. Tom could lease from his utility company for $17.25 per month. This would include parts and services. Or he could buy the hot water heater for $712.99 plus an installation fee of $250 using his credit card. He could afford to pay no more than that $35 each month. So if he used that credit card and paid $35 each month, he has no disposable income left until he's finished paying off that hot water heater. So A says, what costs are associated with buying and leasing? B, what do you recommend for Tom? And then justify your recommendation. Remember, when it says justify, you need to use the math that you've done and other reasoning in order to explain. So just doing the math isn't enough. You need to have some words and proper communication explaining why. C, it says, suppose that the life expectancy of a water heater is 8 years. Would this change your recommendation? And explain. Alright, so let's do the math for buying to start with and see where we go from there. Okay, so for buying, we know that his monthly payments right away can be no more than $35 each month. And we want to see, okay, how long is it going to take him to pay this off? Now he's paying in monthly payments, and if he uses his credit card, it's compounded at 365 days, right? Because it's daily, so 365 is our period for compounding, and our interest rate is at 18.7%. The cost is that $712.99 plus the installation of $250. Alright, plug all of this into your TVM solver and see how long it takes, and then we're also going to figure out the total cost. So doing that, you get 36.3, which means there are 37 monthly payments. If we figure out the interest, putting this into your calculators from 1 to 37, we get $307.83 paid in interest. So in total, this has cost us $712.99 plus $250 plus $307.83 for a total cost of $1,270.82. Okay. Now for leasing, if you were to do that, we're going to use those 37 payments to compare. So, because we didn't know how long it would take them, we're going to use that to help us compare so that it's exactly the same, even amount. So if we do that, it's $17.25, and that would be, in our calculators, $638.25 total. Comparing those values, it's much cheaper to lease. So let's write a recommendation on the next page. So leasing is not only cheaper, but it also includes the maintenance, the parts and services. Alright, so does that change our recommendation? If we go back here, it says, for C, suppose that the life expectancy of the water heater is 8 years. Would this change your recommendation? And explain. So in 8 years, the cost to purchase won't change. It's still that $1,270.82. But how does that change our lease? So the cost to lease, in order for us to do that, that would still be that $17.25. But now you're multiplying that by 12 monthly payments for 8 years. Put that in your calculator and you end up with $1,656. So definitely that would change our answer. So you can see that purchasing is now a better deal, right? That's going to be much cheaper. So he might decide, depending on whether or not he's going to stay there for those whole 8 years, he might know, well, I'm moving in a couple of years, so it doesn't matter, I'm just going to lease. But he's going to have to decide for how long he's there, right? Is it worth him to buy it, or is it worth it for him to lease? That's it for that example. Let's take a look at example 4. Lance started his own construction business 2 years ago. His business has grown quickly, and his home office is no longer big enough. He's considering these two options. He could sign a 3-year lease on office space with monthly rental payments of $2,000 and a refundable damage deposit of $2,000. But there's a penalty for breaking the lease, which is often the case because a lease is a legal document. His other option, he could purchase a house for $285,000 and renovate it so it could be used as an office. A 5% down payment would be required, and he would take out a 15-year mortgage at 5% compounded semi-annually with monthly payments. Assume appreciation of 2% yearly. Okay, well, we haven't had to deal with appreciation yet, and how does that affect what we're doing for a mortgage? A asks, what are the costs of leasing over 15 years? B, what are the costs of buying over 15 years? And C, what's your recommendation and justification for that? Okay, well, let's start with the leasing. So for leasing, we'll assume that the rent stays the same for the 15 years and he doesn't break the lease, so we don't have to deal with the penalty. So if that's the case, he's paying $2,000 every month for 5 years. If he does that, it would cost him $360,000 for the lease. Now, there was that business about the damage deposit, but if we assume that he doesn't do any damage, then that is completely refundable and he'll get that damage deposit back. Alright, so that's the cost for leasing. Now, how does this compare to buying? And then we have to deal with the appreciation cost as well. So if we start the same way we were starting before when we were dealing with mortgage, we have to start with the down payment. Now, the down payment in this case is 5%. So we would take the $285,000 and multiply that by 0.05. If we do that, we get $14,250 for the down payment. Now remember, you're not getting a loan for that. That's money you have to acquire on your own. Now, after you've paid that, you can get the loan for the remainder. So take off the down payment here, and you're left with $270,750. Now that's the value that's going in under PV. That's your loan, your mortgage. Okay, so the mortgage is for 15 years. You're making payments monthly, so we make sure we multiply this by 12. Now remember back, mortgages are compounded semi-annually, so that's a 2. Future value, if we pay off the loan, the mortgage is 0. Okay, so we need to figure out with all of this, oh, and our interest rate is 5%, sorry. We need to figure out what will our monthly payments be. So punch all of that into your TVM solver, and you get $2,133.85 per month. So if we want to figure out what the total buying cost is, we could take our down payment and add our monthly payments, right? So our down payment plus our monthly payments, or you could figure out your interest if you wanted, and figure out how much it's going to cost you. So if we do that, that's $14,250 was our down payment, plus we're making monthly payments of $2,133.85, and we're making that 15 years at 12 monthly payments. Punch all of that into your calculator, and you get a total buying cost of $398,300 $343. Okay, underline that value. You want to keep that track of that. So what have we done so far for buying? We've got the down payment, took that off to figure out what we needed to get a mortgage for. We got our mortgage, we figured out it's going to cost us $2,133.85 per month just for the mortgage. Okay? Doing that, adding that on to our down payment, so that's the total cost that we've paid for the house plus the down payment, right? With our mortgage and our interest and everything all included. Now we have to deal with that appreciation business. And we learned that the appreciation cost means that the value of our house is going up, which is wonderful. So how many years is this appreciating for? Let's go back and have a look at how this was worded. It said, with monthly payments, assume appreciation of 2% yearly. So every year for the 15 years, right, assume for the 15 years, the amount that this house is going to be worth is going to go up by 2% every year. So the same way as we did an exponent last time, right, when we had depreciation, we would have said 0.02 if it was 2% depreciated to the exponent of 15. But we don't want it to go down, we want it to go up. So in order for this to go up, you add 1. Okay? So what do I mean by that? Well, the house cost was $285,000. Okay? So you're going to take that and multiply it by 1 plus 0.02 to the exponent of 15. Okay? If it was depreciating, take off that 1. If it's appreciating, add the 1. And what that 1 does is it adds it on to the value. Doing that math, you get a house that would be worth $383,572.48 at the end of those 15 years. Just going to make a note here that this is the 2% appreciation. Okay, so if this is the cost, underline that, of the appreciation, and before we did the total buying cost, you actually didn't lose as much money as you thought, right? Initially you're looking, okay, $280,000, I've already spent $398, but in the end it's worth $383. So we're assuming that if you sold the house after 15 years, this is how much it would be worth. Okay, so what we call that is your equity. So how much did you actually lose? The actual cost of this house out of your pocket would then be your buying cost, subtract your equity. So it would be $398,343 minus $383,572.48. So the actual cost in the end would be $14,770.52. That's how much it actually cost you to purchase that house if we look at it after 15 years. So looking at this and looking at how much it cost to lease, right? The cost of leasing versus the cost of buying, how would you make a recommendation? Well, it depends whether or not he keeps the house, doesn't keep the house, wants the equity, doesn't want the equity, right? So let's write some sort of concluding statement here. So the cost of leasing is $360,000, but you can move after 3 years and there are no maintenance costs. Everything's taken care of for you. Now the cost of buying was $14,760, but that's only if he sells because he'll have that equity. Now he can stay as long as he wants and he can renovate, and it is considered cheaper because that he does own some of that house, so that he will have that equity. So I would say he should buy. Now there's lots of variables when you're looking at buying, especially when they throw in the information about the appreciation. You always hope that your house is going to appreciate and not depreciate, because if it depreciates, then it's going to cost you more money, right? Because even when you sell at the end, you're not going to get extra money, you're going to lose money. Okay, so have a look through that example again, just reviewing and seeing what exactly we did. So we started with leasing, right? We made some assumptions there. I always state my assumptions so that you know what's going on. Make sure you do that as well. That communication is really important. Then we looked at the buying, made sure we took off that down payment, took into consideration the appreciation, and that became some equity for us, so the cost didn't actually cost as much. The house didn't actually cost as much as we originally thought. Alright, here's the last example. I think you have everything you need in order to work through this example on your own. So I'd like you to do that and then come back and check with my answer and see if you get the same thing that I did. Okay, go ahead and try that one on your own. Alright, so it says Helen and Tim bought a house for $249,900. Don and Pat rented a house for $16,000 per month. So I did that one first, and I calculated that for the 3 years here. Why is the 3 years? Because it says each couple situation after 3 years. So 12 times 3 times, and I got $57,600. Then I went ahead and I did Helen and Tim's situation. So I did the buying cost at first, and I got $70,987.08. But I just did it for the 3 years. So up till there, if they don't sell, that's how much it would cost them. But if they do sell, right, then we've got this other situation, and it says after 3 years, both couples decide to move. Helen and Tim discover that the value of their house depreciated 10% over the 3 years. So I take that and I figure out the depreciation. Okay, so the depreciation here is $224,910 if I multiply that by that 90%. Why 90%? Because it depreciated 10%, so that's what's left over. Okay, so taking that and subtracting off. Now noticing what I'm subtracting off isn't the value that I got at the front, right, at the beginning. So there's this value, the cost if they don't sell, and then where did this value come from? Well, that value came from here. I had to do TVM solver again, right? Because the first TVM solver, I used 20 years, assuming that they weren't selling. The second TVM solver, I had to change, where did that 36 come from? The 36 came from 3 times, right, 3 years at 12 monthly payments. I only did this for 3 years, right? So using the information from before, using that PV, I put that in there again, okay? But now that has changed, right? I'm using PMT. That's missing there. It was 2, 4. I used this value here in order to figure out the new future value. Using that new future value now, using the equity and the depreciation, I could actually figure out how much this was going to cost me. So I took the actual cost, which was the buying cost, minus the equity, and I got a total value here of $62,069.60. Okay, so there's a lot more going on here than we did before, and that isn't completely obvious. If you're going to buy and then sell versus not selling, you're going to have to separate your TVM solvers so you can deal with those separately. Okay, so make sure you go and have a look at this again and review what I did to figure out example 5, and we'll probably go through this one again in class. Alright, thanks for joining me today. That's it for today's lesson.